He was just a broke laborer struggling to scrape together every penny to care for his bedridden mother. But when he heard the sound of something shattering, instinct drove him to run straight into danger to save a woman he'd never met. That single act of courage cost him everything and pulled him into a whirlwind of buried secrets, power, and truth. Will he find the strength, faith, and everything he thought he'd lost, or forced to bow before the cruelty of life? Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The construction site sprawled across 6 blocks of downtown Austin like a skeleton of steel and ambition. Tower cranes stood sentinel against the starless sky, their warning lights blinking red in slow, hypnotic rhythm. It was 2:47 a.m., and the midnight shift hummed with the sound of generators and distant welding torches. Marcus Reed stood alone on the 3rd floor, checking the concrete forms with a flashlight that flickered whenever he moved too quickly. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who'd learned that the world didn't reward loudness. His work boots were scuffed but clean, his safety vest buttoned properly, details his co-workers mocked him for. "Hey Reed," Tommy had sneered during the shift change, "you think you're better than us with your fancy measurements and your rulebook." Marcus hadn't responded. He never did. 3 months at this site, and he was still the outsider, the guy who actually read the safety protocols, who double-checked the rebar spacing, who wrote incident reports when bolts were missing. The other workers saw it as showing off. Marcus saw it as survival. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his tired face. The photo showed his mother, Dorothy Reed, smiling in her church dress, taken 2 years ago before the stroke that had stolen her mobility and most of her words. Now she lay in their small apartment in East Austin, dependent on him for everything. The home care nurse cost more than his rent. A sound snapped his attention back to the present: footsteps on loose gravel, coming from the restricted zone near the north wall. Marcus pocketed his phone and moved toward the noise. The north section was unstable, they'd posted warnings everywhere. He rounded a stack of concrete blocks and saw her, a woman in a safety vest and hard hat but wearing office shoes. She was examining the wall framework with a tablet, completely unaware of the danger. "Ma'am," Marcus called out, "you can't be here, this area's not secured." She looked up, startled. Even in the harsh construction lighting, Marcus could see she was out of place. Expensive watch, manicured nails, the kind of composure that came from boardrooms, not building sites. She began. The sound came first, a grinding metallic shriek that made Marcus's blood freeze. Years of construction experience translated it instantly: structural failure. He didn't think, he ran. The brick panel, 12 feet tall and weighing over a ton, separated from its temporary bracing. Marcus tackled the woman, both of them hitting the ground hard as the panel crashed down exactly where she'd been standing. Dust exploded around them. The impact shook the floor. Smaller debris rained down for several seconds after. When the noise stopped, Marcus could hear her breathing, rapid, panicked gasps against his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, rolling off her carefully. She nodded, unable to speak. In the settling dust and emergency lights, her eyes were wide with shock. She was older than he'd first thought, late 30s maybe, with sharp features and gray eyes that seemed to calculate even in crisis. Marcus stood, offered his hand. She took it, her grip surprisingly firm. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I thank you. What are you doing here?" Marcus brushed dust off his vest, already cataloging the incident in his mind. "This site's closed to non-essential personnel after 10 p.m. "I'm a safety inspector," she said too quickly. "Just doing a surprise audit." Marcus looked at her office shoes, her clean clothes, the expensive tablet. In Louboutins. She followed his gaze to her feet, and had the grace to look embarrassed. "I had a dinner meeting, didn't have time to change." It was a terrible lie, but Marcus was too tired to care. "You should go, I need to report this." "Report it." Her composure cracked slightly. "Is that necessary? A structural panel almost killed someone." "Yeah, it's necessary." He pulled out his incident notebook, a habit from his old life that the other workers mocked. "I need your name for the report." She hesitated. "Eve, just call me Eve." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Everything about this woman screamed secrets, but that wasn't his problem. "All right, Eve, you should get checked out by medical, could have internal injuries." "I'm fine." She was already backing toward the exit. "Really, and thank you again." You saved my life. Just did my job. No. She stopped, turned back. You did more than that. Most people wouldn't have moved that fast. Marcus shrugged. Most people don't pay attention to the sounds a building makes. You know a lot about construction. It wasn't a question. I work in construction, but you talk about it like. She paused, searching for words. Like someone who designs buildings, not just works on them. Marcus's jaw tightened. I should get back to my rounds. You should go home. She seemed to want to say more but nodded instead. As she walked toward the site exit, she looked back once. Even from a distance, Marcus could feel the weight of her gaze, curious, measuring, perhaps even guilty. He turned away first. Whatever her story was, it wasn't his business. He had enough problems. The site went quiet again, leaving only the hum of distant generators and the echo of what almost was. Somewhere beyond the floodlights, the woman he'd saved sat in the dark, trying to steady her breath. Evelyn Hart sat in her Tesla for 20 minutes after leaving the construction site, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Her heart still hammered against her ribs. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that wall falling, heard the terrible grinding sound. She'd come so close to dying. And that man, Marcus according to the name on his vest, had saved her without hesitation. No questions, no demands, just pure instinct to protect another human being. Evelyn looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Dust streaked her face. Her $800 blouse was ruined. She'd lied to him, lied to the man who'd just saved her life, because she couldn't admit who she really was. She was Evelyn Hart, chairwoman and majority shareholder of Hartwell Construction Group, the company building that tower. She'd come tonight because she didn't trust the reports anymore. For 3 months, internal audits had shown perfect compliance, but the numbers didn't add up. Materials were being ordered and paid for, but the construction timeline suggested corners were being cut. So she'd driven out herself, dressed in borrowed safety gear from her car, planning to inspect the structure without the performance her presence usually commanded. Instead, she'd nearly died because of shoddy temporary bracing, exactly the kind of shortcut she'd feared. And now a worker who'd saved her life would probably face consequences for being in the wrong place, for breaking protocol to help someone who'd lied to him. Evelyn pulled out her phone and called her head of security. Daniel, I need footage from the Riverside Tower site tonight. Everything between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Ma'am, is everything all right? Just get me the footage. And Daniel, keep this quiet. She ended the call and started the car. As she drove home through empty Austin streets, she kept thinking about Marcus's hands, steady when he pulled her up, calloused from real work, completely different from the soft handshakes of her boardroom. She thought about his eyes, cautious but kind, tired but alert. She thought about his question, "You okay?" Not "Do you know who I am?" or "What can you do for me?" Just concern for another person. When had someone last looked at her that way? She didn't go home. By dawn the meeting request was already waiting in her inbox. The emergency meeting was called for 7 a.m. Evelyn arrived at Hartwell Tower, her company's headquarters, to find Richard Hale already in her office. Richard was 53, silver-haired, and served as CEO while Evelyn held the chairwoman position her father had left her. He'd been her father's right hand for 20 years, and he treated Evelyn like a child playing dress-up in her dead father's clothes. "We have a situation," Richard said without preamble. He laid a tablet on her desk. "Security footage from Riverside Tower, last night." Evelyn's stomach dropped. The video showed everything, her entering the restricted zone, Marcus running toward her, the wall falling, both of them barely escaping. "That's concerning," she said carefully. "Structural failure could delay." "The concerning part," Richard interrupted, "is you, at a construction site, at 3 a.m., without security, without notification, without authorization. I'm the chairwoman. I don't need authorization to inspect my own projects. You need authorization when your inspection could create liability." Richard leaned forward. "What were you thinking, Evelyn? If that worker hadn't pulled you out, you'd be dead. And then what? The investigation would have revealed you were sneaking around your own site, would have raised questions about why you were there, would have led to audits we cannot afford right now." "Cannot afford? What does that mean?" Richard's expression hardened. "It means we're 3 months from the Riverside Tower completion deadline. We have penalty clauses worth $40 million if we're late. We have investors watching every move, and we absolutely cannot have any suggestion of structural problems. But there was a structural problem. That wall was a temporary support that failed, worker error, already documented. He pulled up another report on the tablet. The night foreman filed an incident report. Marcus Reed, worker ID 7743, violated safety protocols by allowing an unauthorized person into a restricted zone. Evelyn's mouth went dry. That's not what happened. That's what happened according to every rule in our handbook. Richard's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. Evelyn, I know you want to be hands-on. I know you're trying to fill your father's shoes. But James knew when to trust his people. This incident, it's contained. The worker who created the liability will be suspended pending investigation. The temporary bracing will be reinforced, and you won't mention you were there. You're going to punish the man who saved my life. I'm going to protect this company, which is what your father would have done. The mention of her father was calculated. James Hartwell had been Evelyn's hero, a self-made man who'd built Hartwell Construction from nothing, who taught her that integrity was the foundation of all success. He died of a heart attack 2 years ago, leaving Evelyn with a company, a legacy, and crushing doubts about whether she could live up to either. If this leaks, Richard continued, if the press finds out our chairwoman was nearly killed on our own site, the stock will crash. And your father's name, everything he built goes down with it. Can you live with that? Evelyn looked at the tablet, at the frozen image of Marcus pulling her to safety. He saved my life, she whispered. And we'll make sure he's taken care of. Quiet severance, good recommendation. But Evelyn, Richard's voice dropped. If you fight me on this, if you make this into something it doesn't need to be, people will ask questions. Why were you there? What were you looking for? And then we'll have to answer those questions. All of them. The threat was clear. Evelyn had been asking questions about material costs, about timeline discrepancies. If those questions became public, the company her father had built would be torn apart. She thought about her father's funeral, standing at his grave, promising to protect his legacy. She thought about Marcus's tired eyes, his careful notes, his simple statement, just did my job. Fine, she heard herself say. Handle it quietly. Richard nodded, satisfied. Good decision. I'll take care of everything. After he left, Evelyn pulled up the personnel file for Marcus Reed. What she found made her chest tighten. Marcus Reed, 35, bachelor's degree in civil engineering from UT, master's degree in structural engineering from MIT, worked for Jensen and Wright Engineering for 6 years, lead engineer on the Preston Tower project, then nothing for 2 years, then a job as a general laborer at Hartwell Construction. 3 months ago, Evelyn clicked deeper, found news articles from 2 years back, engineer blamed for construction collapse, Reed denies negligence claims, civil suit settled, career in ruins. She read the whole story. A parking garage Marcus had designed had partially collapsed. Investigation revealed substandard materials had been substituted after his final inspection. Marcus had fought to prove his designs were sound, but the construction company had thrown him under the bus, claiming he'd signed off on the changes. Civil suit was settled, no criminal charges, but his career was destroyed. No engineering firm would touch him after that, regardless of the truth. So Marcus Reed, MIT graduate, talented engineer, innocent man, was now working midnight shifts as a general laborer, and she just allowed him to be punished for saving her life. Evelyn closed the file and walked to her office window. 48 stories below, Austin was waking up, people driving to work, living their lives, trusting that the buildings around them were safe, trusting that people like her would do the right thing. She touched her neck, where she could still feel the phantom weight of falling debris. I owe him, she thought. I owe him everything. But what could she do? Richard controlled the day-to-day operations. The board trusted him. If she pushed back, she'd have to explain why she was at the site, what she'd been looking for, and she wasn't ready for that fight yet. Not without proof. The suspension letter would be delivered to Marcus this afternoon. Standard procedure for safety violations. Evelyn made a decision. She couldn't stop it. Not yet, but she could make sure Marcus Reed knew the truth. Eventually, she owed him that much. He had no way of knowing that the lie she'd told to save herself was already eating her alive. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the suspension letter laid out in front of him like an accusation. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the small window of his apartment in East Austin, catching the dust motes that always seemed to hang in the air no matter how much he cleaned. Violation of safety protocols, unauthorized access to restricted zones, failure to maintain secure site perimeter, suspended without pay pending investigation. He'd known it was coming. 24 hours after saving that woman's life, security had escorted him off the site. No explanation, just orders. The letter had arrived this morning via courier. Formal, cold, final. Marcus folded the letter carefully and set it aside. In the bedroom, he could hear his mother's labored breathing, the soft beep of her heart monitor. He'd have to figure out how to pay for her care now. The nurse who came 3 times a week cost $600. Her medications were another $300 a month. Rent was $1,200 for this 2-bedroom that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. He'd been saving for a better place, somewhere with a ramp for her wheelchair, maybe a small porch where she could sit in the sun. He'd been close, another 6 months maybe. Now that was gone. Marcus. His mother's voice was weak, slurred from the stroke. "That you, baby? Yeah, mama, I'm here." He stood pushing down the anger that threatened to rise. It wouldn't help. Anger never helped. Dorothy Reed was propped up in her adjustable bed, the one Marcus had bought used from a medical supply store. She'd been a nurse for 30 years before the stroke. Ironic that she now needed the care she'd once provided. At 62, she looked older, her body betraying her in ways that broke Marcus's heart daily. "You look tired," she said, her words coming slowly. "Bad day?" "Just a long one." Marcus helped her sit up, adjusted her pillows. "You need anything? Water? Your medicine's not due for another hour, but..." "I'm fine, baby. Stop fussing." She reached out, touched his hand with fingers that trembled slightly. "What's wrong? And don't say nothing. I raised you, I know your faces." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed. "Lost the construction job." "What? Why?" "Doesn't matter." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'll find something else. Always do." Marcus Reed. Her voice gained strength, the nurse in her emerging despite the stroke damage. "You tell me what happened." So he did. Not everything. He didn't mention how close the woman had come to dying, didn't describe the sickening sound of that wall coming down. But he told her enough. When he finished, Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You did the right thing." "The right thing got me fired, Mama. The right thing saved a life." She pulled his hand to her chest over her heart. "Your daddy would be proud. I'm proud. You're a good man, Marcus. Always have been." Marcus felt his throat tighten. His father had died when Marcus was 17. Construction accident, crushed by falling equipment. That's what had driven Marcus to become an engineer. The belief that better design, better safety, better oversight could prevent those tragedies. Then he'd learned that sometimes people don't want safety, they want profit. And when things go wrong, they want someone to blame. "Being good doesn't pay the bills," Marcus said quietly. "No, but it lets you sleep at night." Dorothy smiled, that same smile she'd given him all his life whenever he doubted himself. "We'll figure it out. We always do, together." After she fell back asleep, Marcus sat in the living room with a bottle of beer he couldn't quite bring himself to open. The apartment was quiet, except for the old radio on the bookshelf, a gift from his father, one of the few things Marcus still had. He turned it on, found a jazz station. Miles Davis, Blue and Green. His phone buzzed, a text from Tommy, one of the guys from the site. "Heard about your suspension, man. That sucks, but between you and me, you kind of had it coming. Nobody likes a show-off." Marcus deleted the message without responding. Another text, this one from his former advisor at MIT. Marcus heard through the grapevine, "You're having employment troubles again. I'm sorry. If you ever want to try for reinstatement with the engineering board, I'd be happy to write a recommendation. You were one of my best students. What happened to you wasn't fair." Marcus stared at that message for a long time. Reinstatement, getting his professional engineer license back. It would mean years of fighting, thousands in legal fees and reopening wounds that had barely scabbed over. And for what? So another company could use him as a scapegoat when profits mattered more than safety. He deleted that message too. Outside his window, East Austin sprawled in all its complicated beauty, gentrifying block by block, longtime residents being pushed out by rising rents, while new condos and coffee shops promised authentic urban living to people who'd never lived here at all. Marcus's building was one of the last holdouts, a 1960s complex that somehow kept resisting developers. How much longer before they were all forced out? His phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. Mr. Reed, this is Sarah Chen from Channel 8 News. We understand you were involved in an incident at the Riverside Tower construction site. Would you be willing to speak on camera about safety conditions at Hartwell Construction? Marcus turned off his phone. He didn't want to be on the news, didn't want to be a story. He just wanted to work, take care of his mother, and maybe someday believe again that doing the right thing mattered. But as he sat in the darkening apartment, listening to jazz and the sound of his mother's breathing, Marcus couldn't shake the image of that woman's face. Those gray eyes, calculating even in crisis, the expensive watch, the clean clothes, the terrible lie about being an inspector. Who was she really? And did it matter? Probably not. People like her lived in a different world, one where consequences rolled downhill, where money solved problems, where someone like Marcus was just collateral damage in whatever game they were playing. Still, he kept thinking about what she'd said. You did more than that. Most people wouldn't have moved that fast. She'd been right about one thing. Most people wouldn't have. They would have hesitated, calculated risk versus reward, thought about liability. Marcus had just moved. Because when you see someone in danger, you don't think about whether they deserve to be saved. You just save them. That was the difference between his world and theirs, Marcus thought. In his world, you did the right thing because it was right. In their world, you did whatever kept you safe. He finally opened the beer, took a long drink, and tried to figure out how to pay next month's rent. Across the city, Evelyn Hart hadn't slept either, and by morning, her world was starting to crack in its own way. The boardroom on the 48th floor of Hartwell Tower felt like a cage. Evelyn sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by 12 board members who'd served under her father. They looked at her now with varying degrees of patience, doubt, and poorly concealed contempt. Richard Hale stood at the presentation screen, concluding his quarterly report, which brings us to the Riverside Tower project. On schedule, on budget, no significant incidents to report. Evelyn's hand tightened on her pen. No significant incidents except the one where she'd nearly died. The one they were all pretending hadn't happened. However, Richard continued, his tone shifting. We need to discuss a sensitive matter. Evelyn, perhaps you'd prefer to step out. I'll stay, she said coldly. Richard exchanged glances with several board members. Very well, we've received preliminary findings from an ethics investigation. The inquiry concerns your father's tenure as CEO. The room seemed to tilt. Excuse me, it's routine, Richard said in that smooth, patronizing voice. Given recent SEC scrutiny of construction firms, we commissioned an independent review of all projects from the past 10 years, just to ensure full compliance. My father ran this company with complete integrity. Of course he did. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. But perceptions matter, Evelyn. And the preliminary report has raised some questions. Nothing serious yet, but questions. Edward Morrison, the oldest board member and her father's longtime friend, spoke up. What kind of questions? Richard pulled up a slide, a complex chart showing material costs versus construction timelines on projects from 5 to 8 years ago. Patterns that suggest irregularities, possibly materials being substituted, costs being inflated, quality controls being bypassed. That's impossible, Evelyn said. My father would never. Your father was a great man, Richard interrupted softly. But he was also human, and he built this company from nothing in a very competitive industry. Sometimes to survive, to win contracts, to beat deadlines, compromises get made. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. It's not malice, it's just business. Evelyn felt sick. Are you saying my father built this company on fraud? I'm saying that if certain information became public, it could be interpreted that way. The ethics committee has the full report. They're deciding whether to present it to the board officially or handle it quietly. The threat was clear as glass. Evelyn looked around the table. Most board members avoided her eyes. They'd already made their decision. What do you want? She asked quietly. Cooperation. Richard sat down across from her. We're facing some challenges. Material costs on Riverside Tower have exceeded projections. We've had to make some adjustments to stay on budget. Nothing dangerous, you understand, just efficient. What kind of adjustments? Engineering specifications. Some of the steel reinforcement in the support columns, for instance. The original designs called for grade 60 rebar at certain densities. We're using grade 40 at reduced spacing. It meets code minimum, saves us $2.3 million. Marcus's face flashed in Evelyn's mind. His careful measurements, his incident notebook, his comment about paying attention to the sounds a building makes. That's not meeting the design specifications, Evelyn said. It's meeting code, which is what matters legally. My father's designs always exceeded code minimums. That was his standard. Your father's standards were excellent for his time. But times change. Margins tighten. If we want to remain competitive, we have to be flexible. Richard leaned forward. Here's the situation, Evelyn. We have a building to finish, investors to satisfy, and a company to protect. If you cooperate, if you trust us to handle the technical details, then the ethics report stays buried. Your father's reputation remains intact. His legacy stays pure. And if I don't cooperate, Richard's expression turned sympathetic, then the ethics committee will have no choice but to release their findings. The media will tear your father apart. Every building with the Hartwell name will be suspect. The company will collapse. And everything James Hartwell built, his entire life's work, will be remembered as a foundation of lies. You're blackmailing me, Evelyn whispered. I'm protecting this company, which is what your father would want, what he would have expected from you. Edward Morrison cleared his throat. Richard, this seems extreme. Edward, you're a good friend, but you don't understand the current regulatory environment. One investigation leads to another. One audit triggers a cascade. Right now we can contain this, but only if everyone cooperates. Richard turned back to Evelyn. So here's my question. Do you want to save the company? Or do you want to save your father's image? Because Evelyn, I don't think you can do both. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Evelyn sat alone in the boardroom long after everyone left. Through the windows, Austin stretched out below, a city her father had helped build, tower by tower, project by project. He'd taught her that a good building started with a solid foundation, that you couldn't shortcut structural integrity. That reputation was built brick by brick, through consistency and honesty. Had he been lying? Had his entire philosophy been a facade while he cut corners behind the scenes? Or was Richard the one lying now, using her father's name as leverage because he knew she'd do anything to protect it? Evelyn pulled out her phone and called her lawyer Michael Torres, one of the few people she trusted completely. Michael, I need you to do something quietly, very quietly. What do you need? I need you to investigate Marcus Reed. He's a worker, was a worker at my Riverside Tower site. I need to know everything about him. His background, his qualifications, why he's working construction when he has a master's degree in structural engineering. Evelyn, what's going on? She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, expensive suit, perfect hair, everything her father had wanted her to be. I think, she said slowly, that I'm being lied to, and I need to know by who. After hanging up, Evelyn sat in the empty boardroom until the sun set and the cleaning crew arrived. She thought about her father's funeral, the hundreds of people who'd come, the stories they'd told about his generosity, his integrity, his vision. She thought about the weight of his name, the responsibility of his legacy, and she thought about Marcus Reed, losing his job because he'd done the right thing. Somewhere in all of this was the truth, and Evelyn was beginning to realize that finding it might cost her everything. But what choice did she have? Her father had taught her one thing above all: a building is only as strong as its foundation, and if the foundation is rotten, eventually everything falls. She just needed to figure out what was holding up Hartwell Construction. And she was terribly afraid she already knew the answer. For 3 days, Evelyn barely slept. Every report she signed, every email she sent felt like a lie, waiting to collapse. On the 4th day she decided to face the man who'd already seen what her company really was. 3 days after the suspension, Marcus was repairing a fence in the apartment complex courtyard. The building manager let him do odd jobs for rent credit. When a Tesla pulled into the parking lot, he recognized the car before he saw the driver. When Evelyn Hart stepped out, Marcus felt his jaw tighten. She looked different in daylight. wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of the dusty safety gear. But he'd know those eyes anywhere, calculating, intelligent, guilty. "Hello, Marcus," she said, approaching carefully. "It's Mr. Reed." He turned back to the fence post, hammer in hand. "And I don't have anything to say to you. I don't blame you for being angry." "I'm not angry." Marcus drove a nail with more force than necessary. "Anger requires surprise. I knew exactly what would happen when I helped you." Evelyn flinched. "Then why did you help me?" "Because people don't deserve to die just because they're in the wrong place." He finally looked at her. "Even liars." "I'm sorry I lied about who I was." "Are you sorry I got fired?" The question hung between them. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "It's more complicated than it's really not." Marcus set down the hammer. "You're rich, I'm not. You made a mistake, I paid for it. That's how the world works. What I don't understand is why you're here now. To apologize, to feel better about yourself, because I don't have the energy to make you feel better about ruining my life. I didn't want you to be suspended, but you let it happen." "Yes." Her honesty surprised him. "I let it happen because I was scared. Because I have a company to protect, and a father's legacy to preserve, and a board that's threatening me. But none of that is an excuse. You saved my life, and I repaid you by destroying yours. And I'm sorry." Marcus studied her. She looked tired, he realized, the kind of tired that came from not sleeping, from carrying weights that pressed down until you couldn't stand up straight. He knew that tired. "Why were you really at the site?" he asked. "I was looking for proof." "Of what?" Evelyn glanced around the courtyard. An older black woman watching from a balcony, 2 kids playing basketball, a man working on a car. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't. But I think you're the only person who can help me." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Lady, I can barely help myself right now. Please, just hear me out." Against his better judgment, Marcus led her to his apartment. Inside she looked around with careful attention. The modest furniture, the medical equipment in the bedroom, the stack of bills on the kitchen table. "Your mother," Evelyn said, noticing the pill organizers. "How is she?" "How do you know about my mother?" "I looked into your background. After the suspension, I found out about everything. MIT, your engineering career. What happened at Preston Tower?" Marcus felt his shoulders tense. "Then you know I'm damaged goods. So whatever you want from me, you were innocent." Evelyn interrupted. "The materials were substituted after your final inspection. You fought to prove your designs were sound, but the construction company needed a scapegoat. Doesn't matter what the truth was. My career still ended. It matters to me." Evelyn pulled out a tablet. "Marcus, I need you to look at something. These are the current plans for Riverside Tower, and these are the original designs my father approved 3 years ago." She laid both sets of plans side by side on his kitchen table. Marcus didn't want to look, didn't want to care. But engineering was in his blood. He couldn't help but see the differences. "They changed the rebar specifications," he said slowly. "Reduced the density by 30%, used lower-grade steel." Marcus's finger traced the support column details. "These columns are bearing the weight of 40 stories. If they've reduced reinforcement, what would happen? Depends on load conditions. Normal weather, normal use, probably fine. But factor in wind shear, settlement, thermal expansion." He looked up at her. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think they're cutting corners throughout the entire structure. And I think my father either started it, or knew about it. And I need to know the truth before that building is completed." "Why come to me?" "Because you're the only person I've met who actually cares about doing things right. Everyone else just cares about deadlines, and budgets, and covering their asses." Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. "You lost your career because you wouldn't compromise on safety. I need someone who won't compromise now." Marcus pushed the plans away. "Even if what you're saying is true, even if I wanted to help, which I don't, I can't. I'm suspended, remember? I can't access the site, and I'm sure as hell not getting my engineering license involved in whatever corporate politics you're dealing with." "I understand." Evelyn gathered the plans. "I'm sorry I bothered you." She was halfway to the door when Marcus's mother called out, "Is that Marcus? Baby, who's there?" Before Marcus could answer, Evelyn had moved to the bedroom doorway. "Hello, ma'am. I'm sorry to disturb you." Dorothy looked at Evelyn, then at Marcus, then back at Evelyn with the shrewd assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading people. "You're the woman from the construction site." "Yes, ma'am. You here to make things right?" Evelyn's composure finally cracked. "I'm trying to. But I don't know how." Dorothy nodded slowly. "That's honest at least. Marcus, get the lady some water. She looks like she's about to fall over." "Mama, don't mama me. Get the water." 5 minutes later they were all in the small living room. Marcus on the sagging couch, Evelyn in the worn armchair, Dorothy in her wheelchair by the window. "My son says you're in trouble," Dorothy said. "My company is, my father's company, and I don't know if he built it honestly or not." Evelyn's hands trembled slightly on her water glass. "If I investigate, I might destroy everything he built. If I don't, people could get hurt." "Sounds like you already know what you have to do." "I can't do it alone. I don't have the technical knowledge. The people I'd normally trust are all either complicit or scared." Evelyn looked at Marcus. "I need someone who understands structures, who can recognize problems, who can't be bought or intimidated." "You need an engineer," Marcus said. "I need you." "Why?" "Because you moved without thinking when that wall fell. You didn't calculate risk, you didn't worry about consequences, you just saved someone." Evelyn's voice was steady now. "Everyone else in my company calculates. They measure risk versus reward, cost versus benefit. But sometimes the right thing doesn't balance on a spreadsheet, sometimes you just have to move." Marcus stared at her. "You're asking me to investigate the company that just fired me? To risk what's left of my reputation? To possibly prove that your father who built half of Austin was corrupt?" "Yes. And what do I get if I help you?" Evelyn met his eyes. "The truth. And maybe the chance to do what you've always done. Make sure buildings are safe." "Truth doesn't pay my mother's medical bills." "No. But I will." Evelyn pulled out a checkbook. "Whatever you need, however much it costs. And when this is over, if you want it, I'll help you fight to get your engineering license reinstated. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll testify that you were right about Preston Tower. I'll do whatever it takes." "You can't buy me," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to save people's lives, including my own soul." Evelyn's hands were shaking again. "My father taught me that a good building starts with a solid foundation. But what if the foundation is rotten? What if everything I believed was built on lies?" Dorothy spoke up. "What do you believe, child?" "I believe." Evelyn paused, gathering her thoughts. "I believe my father was a good man who made mistakes. I believe the people running his company now are making worse ones. And I believe that if I don't do something, people will die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually that building will fail, and it will be my fault for not stopping it." Marcus thought about his father, crushed by falling equipment because someone hadn't secured it properly. He thought about the Preston Tower garage, collapsing because someone had substituted cheaper materials. He thought about that brick panel at Riverside Tower, falling where Evelyn had been standing seconds before. He thought about all the people who would work in that tower, live in the apartments, shop in the stores, never knowing that the building holding them up was compromised. "If I do this," Marcus said slowly, "and we find out your father was involved, can you handle that truth?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I have to, because the alternative is letting his name be used to justify more corruption. And he deserves better than that, even if he wasn't perfect." Marcus looked at his mother. Dorothy nodded slightly, the same nod she'd given him when he was 17 and had to decide whether to go to college or stay home to help with bills. The nod that meant, "I trust you to do what's right." "All right," Marcus said, "but we do this my way. No shortcuts, no cover-ups. If we find evidence of problems, it goes to the authorities, even if it destroys your company." "Agreed. And if someone tries to stop us, then we make enough noise that they can't." Evelyn stood extending her hand. "Partners." Marcus looked at her hand for a long moment. This woman had nearly gotten him killed, had cost him his job, had lied to his face. She was offering him money he desperately needed, and a chance at redemption he'd stopped hoping for. Every rational part of him said to refuse, but when had Marcus ever been rational about doing the right thing? He stood and shook her hand. "Partners." As Evelyn was leaving, her car wouldn't start. The Tesla's battery was dead. she'd left the climate control running. Marcus spent 20 minutes helping her jump it from his ancient Honda, their conversation shifting to easier topics. Her father's love of jazz, same as Marcus's. The changes in East Austin, she remembered when it looked completely different, the weight of inheriting someone else's dreams. By the time the Tesla started, something had shifted between them. Not trust exactly, that would take time, but recognition maybe. Two people trapped by circumstances, trying to find their way to something better. Thank you, Evelyn said, for the jump, and for agreeing to help. Don't thank me yet. You might not like what we find. I know. She climbed into her car, then looked back. Marcus, that night at the site, when you pulled me away from that wall, you said, just did my job, but it wasn't your job to save me. Wasn't anyone else's either. She smiled, sad and tired, and genuine. Maybe that's the problem with the world. Too many people think someone else will do what needs doing. As she drove away, Dorothy called from inside. I like her. Mama, you like everyone. Not true. I don't like that Richard man she works with. Saw him on the news once. Got mean eyes. Dorothy wheeled herself to the doorway. But that girl, she's scared and she's trying. That counts for something. Marcus watched the Tesla disappear down the street. You think I made the right call? I think you made the only call you could. You've never been able to walk away from someone who needs help. Gets you in trouble every time. Dorothy smiled, but it's who you are, and I wouldn't change it. That night, Marcus pulled out his old engineering textbooks, the ones he'd kept even after losing his license, because you don't stop being something just because people say you can't do it anymore. He studied the Riverside Tower plans Evelyn had left, making notes, calculations, seeing patterns that worried him. The modifications weren't random, they were systematic. Someone with engineering knowledge had gone through the original designs and reduced specifications in ways that would save maximum money while staying just within code minimums. But building code minimums were exactly that, minimums. They didn't account for real-world conditions, Austin's occasional ice storms, the clay soil that shifted over time, the cumulative stress of decades of use. James Hartwell's original designs had been beautiful in their over-engineering. Safety factors of 3 or 4 where code only required 1.5, redundant support systems, extra reinforcement at stress points. Someone had stripped all of that away. The question was, had James Hartwell done it himself, or had someone else betrayed his vision after he died? Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Thank you for giving me a chance, I won't waste it. He typed back, site inspection tomorrow night. Midnight. Can you get us in without being seen? Yes. Then bring a flashlight and wear shoes you can run in. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Understood. Marcus set down his phone and looked at the plans again. Somewhere in that building was the truth about James Hartwell, about Hartwell Construction, about whether doing the right thing ever really mattered. He'd spent 2 years believing the answer was no. Maybe it was time to find out for sure. The next night, Austin slept while 2 people prepared to wake a secret buried in concrete. Getting into the Riverside Tower site at midnight was easier than Marcus expected. Evelyn had override codes for every security system, one of the few chairwoman privileges Richard hadn't been able to strip away. They entered through a service entrance on the east side, the construction site sprawling before them like a skeleton in the darkness. Where do we start? Evelyn asked, her voice echoing in the empty space. Marcus pulled out his tablet, overlaying the original plans with the modified versions, support columns. If they're cutting corners on rebar, that's where it'll show. They moved through the structure carefully, Marcus's flashlight illuminating concrete and steel. He'd brought a portable X-ray fluorescence analyzer, borrowed from a friend who still worked in materials testing. It could detect the composition and density of embedded reinforcement without drilling. The first column looked fine, so did the second and third. The fourth column made Marcus's stomach drop. What is it? Evelyn asked. Marcus ran the analyzer again, checking his readings. According to the plans, both the original and modified, this column should have grade 40 rebar at 8-inch spacing. Minimum code for a building this height. And it has grade 40 at 12-inch spacing. Below code minimum. And look here, he shone his light on the concrete surface. See these marks? This was poured at least 3 weeks ago. long after the concrete testing should have verified reinforcement. Meaning what? Meaning someone's falsifying the concrete tests, or doing them before the final rebar placement. Marcus moved to the next column, then the next. Each one showed the same pattern specifications, reduced beyond even the modified plans. By 2 a.m. they'd checked 17 columns across 3 floors. 14 were below code minimum. Evelyn sat on a pile of lumber, her face pale in the flashlight glow. How bad is this? Bad. This building should handle wind loads up to Category 3 hurricane wind standard for high-rises in Texas. With this reinforcement, Marcus did quick calculations on his tablet. Category 1, maybe Category 2 if we're lucky. And that's not accounting for settling or material degradation over time. So in 10 years, 20 years, in the right conditions, this building could collapse. Partially or completely, could be a storm, could be just the cumulative stress of time and temperature changes. Marcus looked up at the floors rising above them. Your father's original designs would have stood for 100 years. This I'd be surprised if it makes 50 without major structural problems. Evelyn's hands were shaking. We need to report this. To who? Building inspectors. The people signing off on these inspections are already compromised. They're approving work that's below code. The police? This is a civil matter until something actually fails. Your board? They're the ones who might have ordered this. Then what do we do? Marcus was about to answer when his flashlight caught something, a reflection from one of the upper floors. Movement. Kill your light, he whispered. They crouched in darkness. Above them flashlight beams swept through the structure. Voices carried down, distorted by concrete and steel. Told you someone was accessing the security systems. Think it's heart, doesn't matter. If they're documenting the columns, we need to know what they found. Marcus grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her toward the emergency stairs. They moved quickly but quietly, descending 2 floors before the pursuit began in earnest. Their east stairwell. What followed was a nightmare of concrete corridors and dark construction zones. Marcus led them through spaces he'd learned during his 3 months on site, passages between floors, gaps in walls, service areas that weren't on official plans. Behind them flashlights swept and voices called out. Professional security, not just guards. They moved with practiced efficiency, cutting off exits, coordinating through radios. Marcus and Evelyn ended up trapped in a storage container on the ground level, wedged between pallets of ceramic tile. Through the gap in the container doors, they could see lights sweeping past. Evelyn's breathing was rapid, panicked. Marcus touched her shoulder, signaling quiet. She nodded, pressing her hand over her mouth. The search continued for another 20 minutes. Finally the voices faded, moving to other areas of the site. When Marcus was sure they were gone, he whispered, "We need to move, they'll be watching the exits." "There's a maintenance tunnel," Evelyn breathed. "Southeast corner, leads to the city storm drain system. My father had it installed for emergency pump access. It's not on current site plans." They made it to the tunnel, crawling through a space barely wide enough for their shoulders. When they finally emerged 4 blocks away, dawn was breaking over Austin. They sat on the curb, filthy with concrete dust and mud, while traffic began to build around them. "They knew we were there," Evelyn said. "Someone was monitoring the security system, waiting for us. Richard Hale, maybe, or someone working for him." Evelyn looked at her hands, scraped, dirty, trembling. "I thought power meant control. Turns out, it only means fear." Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop investigating Riverside Tower. This is your only warning." He showed it to Evelyn. She pulled out her own phone, found a similar message. "Your father's reputation is more fragile than you think. Walk away. They're threatening us," Evelyn said. "Yeah, so what do we do?" Marcus thought about his father, crushed by equipment. About the Preston Tower garage, collapsing. About all the people who would work and live in Riverside Tower, trusting that the building was safe. He thought about doing the right thing, and how it had cost him everything. Then he thought about what it would cost if he didn't. "We get proof they can't deny," Marcus said. "We document everything. We get testimony from workers who've seen the specifications change. We find the paper trail showing who ordered the modifications, and then we go public with all of it. That'll destroy my father's company, maybe, but it'll save the people who would have died when that building failed." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, studying his face like she was seeing him for the first time. You really believe that matters more, saving people you don't know versus protecting a legacy, don't you? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my father used to say that a building is just concrete and steel. What matters is the people inside it. I thought I understood what he meant, but maybe I didn't. Maybe he was saying that no building, no company, no legacy is worth a human life. Or maybe he was saying that the real legacy isn't the buildings we leave behind, it's whether we kept people safe while they stood. Evelyn smiled, tired and sad and determined. He would have liked you. You remind me of him. The way I want to remember him, anyway. We might prove he was part of this, Marcus warned. The corruption might go all the way back. Then we prove it, and we deal with the truth, whatever it is. Evelyn stood, offering Marcus her hand. Because you're right, people's lives matter more than my comfort. As they walked to Evelyn's car, parked blocks away, covered in morning dew, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Purpose. Not the desperate purpose of survival, of paying bills and getting through days, but the deep purpose of doing work that mattered, of using his skills to protect people, of being the person his father had taught him to be. Maybe doing the right thing didn't always work out, but maybe that didn't matter as much as he'd thought. Maybe what mattered was doing it anyway. In the weeks that followed, silence became their camouflage, and truth their weapon. For 3 weeks, Marcus and Evelyn worked in secret. During the day, Marcus interviewed workers, guys he'd worked with, who trusted him enough to tell the truth. Evelyn pulled financial records, tracing material costs and payments. Together they built a case that would be impossible to deny. They found purchase orders for grade 60 rebar that was never delivered. They found inspection reports signed by engineers who hadn't been on site. They found a web of shell companies and inflated invoices that funneled money out of the construction budget and into offshore accounts. And they found that it had started 18 months ago, 6 months after James Hartwell's death. Richard Hale, Evelyn said, staring at the financial records spread across Marcus's kitchen table. He waited until my father died, then started systematically stripping away everything that made Hartwell Construction trustworthy. Your father didn't know, Marcus said gently. No, but his name is still being used to justify it. Every corner they cut, every safety measure they eliminate, they do it in the name of maintaining Hartwell efficiencies, or honoring James's vision of cost-effective excellence. Evelyn's voice broke. They're destroying his legacy while pretending to preserve it. Marcus's friend in the city building department confirmed that inspectors had been pressured, not bribed exactly, but encouraged to be flexible in their interpretations. Sign off a little early, trust the contractor's word. Don't slow down progress with excessive scrutiny. They had everything they needed. The plan was to present their findings to the city building commissioner on Monday morning, with copies going simultaneously to the media and the state attorney general. The storm hit on Sunday night. Marcus was at his apartment when the wind started, strong gusts that rattled windows and sent trash cans tumbling down the street. He checked his weather app's severe thunderstorm warning, possible tornado activity, winds up to 70 miles per hour. His phone rang. Evelyn, are you watching the weather? Her voice was tight with fear. Yeah, it's bad, but Marcus, there are workers at Riverside Tower. Night shift, they're pouring concrete on the top floors. Richard pushed them to work through the weekend to meet deadline. Marcus felt cold spread through his chest. How many workers? 12, maybe 15. And Marcus, with the winds this strong, if those compromised columns can't handle the lateral load, she didn't need to finish. Marcus was already grabbing his keys. I'm heading there now. Call 911. Tell them there's a structural emergency at Riverside Tower. They won't believe me without proof. Then show them our documentation. Email it to everyone, but get emergency services there. Now, the drive to the site took forever through wind and rain. Marcus could see the tower from blocks away, lights blazing on the upper floors, the crane still extended, the whole structure swaying more than it should in the wind. He arrived at the same time as Evelyn. They ran to the site entrance together, where security tried to stop them. You can't be here. Site's closed to unauthorized. I'm the chairwoman, Evelyn said. Let us through. Miss Hart, Mr. Hale said you're not to access. Marcus pushed past him. Call Richard Hale and tell him people are dying. See which he cares about more. They took the construction elevator up, terrifyingly exposed to the wind, the cage swaying with each gust. At the 20th floor, they found the workers. Everyone out, Marcus shouted. Building's not safe in this wind, we need to evacuate. The foreman, a guy named Rodriguez, looked skeptical. Who the hell are you? He's an engineer, Evelyn said, and I'm ordering an evacuation. Everyone down. Now, lady, we got concrete setting. We leave now, it'll be ruined, cost us 2 days of work. Marcus grabbed Rodriguez's shoulder. The support columns are compromised. Half the rebar is missing. This building can't handle these wind loads. You want to be here when it fails. A terrible grinding sound echoed through the structure, metal stressing beyond its limits. Rodriguez's eyes went wide. Everyone out, move. The evacuation was chaotic, workers grabbing tools, someone trying to secure equipment, Marcus and Evelyn pushing them toward the elevator. They got 8 workers down in the first trip. When the elevator returned for the second group, the grinding sound came again, longer, louder. The floor tilted slightly under their feet. It's starting, Marcus said. We need to move faster. They got the remaining workers to the elevator, but as the doors closed, Marcus saw movement on the floor above. Someone was still up there. Go, he told Evelyn. Get them down. I'll check the upper floor. Marcus, go. He took the stairs 3 at a time, wind screaming through open sections of the building. The upper floor was a mess of plastic sheeting and exposed rebar, concrete forms half filled. In the corner, a young worker, couldn't have been more than 20, was trapped under a fallen beam. Help, the kid gasped. Can't move it. Marcus grabbed the beam, but it was too heavy. He looked around, found a hydraulic jack, positioned it under the beam. Each second felt like an hour. The building groaned around them. Somewhere below, something cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The jack lifted the beam enough for the kid to crawl out. Can you walk? Think so. Another crack, much louder. The floor tilted more noticeably now. Through the open sides of the building, Marcus could see the crane swaying dangerously. They made it to the stairs just as part of the floor above collapsed. Concrete and rebar crashing down where they'd been standing seconds before. Dust filled the air. Emergency alarms wailed, and still the wind howled, pushing against a building that was fighting to stay upright. Evelyn met them on the 15th floor. Everyone else is out. What were you thinking? Later, Marcus said, we need to move. They made it to the 10th floor before the major failure happened. The sound was indescribable, a roar of tearing metal and crumbling concrete. The entire northwest corner of the building from floors 35 to 42 separated from the main structure. 40 tons of concrete and steel fell like rain, crashing through lower floors, breaking apart as it fell. The impact knocked them off their feet. The building swayed sickeningly. Emergency lights flickered. Somewhere, gas lines ruptured with sharp hisses. Keep moving. Marcus pulled them both up, and they ran. They made it out just as the second failure occurred. The main support columns on floors 20 through 25, weakened by the impact from above, began to buckle. The building didn't collapse completely. James Hartwell's original design for the lower floors saved it, but the upper half pancaked down. 3 stories, a controlled failure that was still catastrophic. Emergency vehicles arrived, fire trucks, ambulances, news vans. Marcus, Evelyn, and the rescued worker were pulled away from the site by paramedics. Behind them, Riverside Tower stood broken, smoke rising from ruptured gas lines, its top 15 floors a shattered ruin. Richard Hale arrived 30 minutes later, his face pale as he took in the destruction. He saw Evelyn and Marcus being treated by paramedics and walked over, his expression unreadable. You did this, he said quietly. You created this disaster. If we'd left things alone, this would have happened in 5 years with the building fully occupied. Evelyn said. Her voice was steady despite the oxygen mask. 200 people working, shopping, living in a tower that couldn't stand up to a strong wind. You can't prove. We can prove everything, Marcus interrupted. He pulled out his phone, played a video of Richard's voice from a recorded board meeting. We'll save $2.3 million by reducing rebar density. The specifications are excessive anyway. James Hartwell was too cautious. We need to be more efficient. Richard's face went white. We have everything, Evelyn said. Purchase orders, inspection reports, financial records, worker testimony, and in about, she checked her phone. 15 minutes, copies of all of it will hit the state attorney general, the city building commissioner, and every major news outlet in Texas. You'll destroy your father's company. No. Evelyn stood, pushing away the paramedic. You destroyed my father's company. You used his name to justify corruption, used his reputation to cut corners, used his death as an opportunity to get rich. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. She walked toward the news cameras, where reporters were already gathering. Marcus watched her go, seeing the steel in her spine that reminded him of every great engineer he'd ever known. The understanding that sometimes you had to tear down what was broken to build something that would last. A reporter thrust a microphone at Evelyn. Hart, can you comment on what happened tonight? Yes, Evelyn's voice carried across the site. I can tell you that Riverside Tower was built with substandard materials and falsified inspections. I can tell you that my company, the company my father built on principles of safety and integrity, was corrupted by people who valued profit over human lives. And I can tell you that as of this moment, I'm fully cooperating with authorities to ensure everyone responsible is held accountable. Including yourself, another reporter asked. Including myself, I knew there were problems, and I didn't act fast enough. That's on me. Evelyn looked directly at the camera, but I'm acting now, and I won't stop until every building with the Hartwell name is verified as safe. Marcus's phone rang. His mother, baby, I'm watching the news. Are you okay? Yeah, Mama, I'm okay. You did good tonight. Your daddy would be proud. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Thanks, Mama. When the paramedics finally cleared him, Marcus found Evelyn sitting on the hood of a fire truck, watching the broken tower. He sat beside her. Your board's going to crucify you, he said. Probably. The company might not survive. Maybe not, but people will. She looked at him. Is that enough? Marcus thought about the workers they'd saved, about buildings all over Austin that would now be inspected, about lives that would continue because they'd chosen truth over comfort. Yeah, he said. It's enough. As dawn broke over Austin, Riverside Tower stood as a monument to what happens when doing the right thing comes too late. But in the growing light, Marcus could also see something else. People walking away alive, emergency workers helping the injured, and a woman who'd chosen integrity over inheritance. Maybe that was its own kind of foundation. Maybe it would be strong enough to build on. From the ruins of Riverside Tower came something new, small, steady, and honest. 1 year later, the building stood on the east side of Austin, far from the gleaming towers downtown. It was only 3 stories, modest and solid, with wide windows and a courtyard where young people gathered with blueprints and coffee. The sign above the entrance read, Hartwell Reed Community Engineering Center. Marcus stood in the main classroom, watching 15 students, ranging from 18 to 45, build concrete test cylinders. They measured carefully, following his instructions, asking questions when they were unsure. Why does the water-cement ratio matter so much? Asked Maria, a single mother of 2 who was training to become a civil engineer after years working retail. Because concrete strength comes from the chemical reaction between water and cement, Marcus explained. Too much water, and you dilute the reaction. Too little, and the cement doesn't fully hydrate. Getting it right is the difference between something that lasts decades and something that fails. He walked between the workstations, checking measurements, offering guidance. This was the part of engineering he'd always loved. Teaching people to see the logic and beauty in materials, in forces, in the physics that held the world together. Professor Reed, he still wasn't used to the title. After the Riverside Tower collapse, after Richard Hale and 6 other executives were arrested for fraud and criminal negligence, after Evelyn had spent months cooperating with federal investigators, she'd made him an offer. Help her rebuild Hartwell Construction the right way. Not as a laborer, as an engineer, as a teacher, as a partner in something new. The State Engineering Board had reinstated Marcus's license after reviewing the Preston Tower case, with Evelyn's lawyers proving that Marcus had been scapegoated for crimes he didn't commit. She'd spent $250,000 on his legal fees and never mentioned it. Yes, Maria, I was wondering, the Riverside Tower collapse. When you were there that night, were you scared? Marcus considered the question, terrified. But sometimes being scared is less important than being useful. The classroom door opened. Evelyn entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder of papers. At 39, she looked different than the woman who'd snuck onto that construction site a year ago. More tired maybe, but also more solid, like she'd finally found foundation. "Am I interrupting?" she asked. "Just finishing up." Marcus turned to the class. "That's enough for today. Let your cylinders cure for 24 hours, then we'll test their compression strength tomorrow." As the students filed out, several stopped to talk with Evelyn, asking questions about the Foundation's programs, thanking her for the scholarships, requesting advice on their career paths. She remembered all their names, knew their stories, genuinely cared. When the classroom was empty, she handed Marcus his coffee. "I have news, good or bad, both. The bankruptcy court approved the settlement. Hartwell Construction Group no longer exists." Marcus had known it was coming. After the investigation revealed the scope of Richard Hale's corruption, the company had been unable to survive. Lawsuits from investors, criminal charges, damaged reputation, it had all been too much. And the good news, the court approved our bid for the assets. We officially own the name, the intellectual property, and the community programs. Evelyn smiled. "We're starting over, clean slate. No legacy to protect except the one we build ourselves. Hartwell Reed Construction, if you want, or Reed Hartwell. Or we drop both names and call it something new." She sat on one of the student desks, suddenly looking vulnerable. "I keep thinking about my father, about what he'd want." "What do you think he'd want?" "I think," Evelyn paused, gathering her thoughts. "I think he'd want me to do better than he did. To build something that doesn't just last, but that's worth lasting. That prioritizes people over profit, that teaches the next generation to do the same." Marcus looked around the classroom, at the equipment they'd installed, the materials library, the computers loaded with design software. They'd built this place with money from the settlement, with donations from people who believed in second chances, with their own hands when the budget ran short. "He'd be proud of you," Marcus said. "Of us." Evelyn met his eyes. "You saved my life twice. Once from that falling wall. Once from becoming the person who let corruption continue because it was easier than fighting. You saved yourself. I just reminded you what you already knew. Maybe." She walked to the window overlooking the courtyard. Students were still gathered there, studying together, helping each other with problems. "I used to think legacy was about what you left behind. Buildings with your name on them, companies that outlasted you. But maybe legacy is simpler than that." "What is it?" "The people you helped, the things you taught them, the choices you made when it would have been easier to look away." Evelyn turned back to him. "My father built towers. You and I, we're building engineers. People who understand that no structure matters if it's not safe, that no profit justifies risking lives, that doing the right thing is the only thing worth doing." Marcus's phone buzzed, a message from his mother. "Don't forget dinner at 6. Maria and her kids are coming. I made your favorite. I need to go," he said. "Mama's cooking. How is Dorothy?" "Good days and bad days. But more good lately." The better medical care that Evelyn's salary made possible had helped. So had the new apartment with a proper wheelchair ramp and grab bars in every room. "She wants you to come to dinner next week." "I'd like that." As Marcus gathered his things, Evelyn stopped him. "Marcus, thank you, for believing that I could be better, for giving me the chance to try. You gave yourself that chance. I just moved when I saw someone in danger. That's what makes you a good engineer. You see the problems before they become disasters. You move before the wall falls." Evelyn smiled. "That's what I want to teach here. Not just how to calculate loads and design structures, but how to see when something's wrong and have the courage to fix it. No shortcuts," Marcus said. "No lies, just kindness." They left the building together, walking through the courtyard where their students still gathered. The afternoon sun painted Austin in gold, a city of towers and bridges, of structures built by people who believed in something solid. Marcus thought about his father, crushed by negligence, about Preston Tower, destroyed by greed, about Riverside Tower, broken by corruption. But he also thought about this place, small and modest, built on principles that couldn't be cut or compromised or corrupted, a foundation that would hold because it was built on truth. Behind them the sign caught the sunlight,
Hartwell Reed Community Engineering Center. Not a monument to the past, a foundation for the future, and maybe Marcus thought that was the only legacy worth building.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.